The 2021 NFL football season was not normal to say the least. There were plenty of familiar faces in new places, like the monumental trade that occurred last January between the Rams and Lions, which swapped quarterbacks and some draft capital. Odell Beckham is now a receiver for the Los Angeles Rams, and there were of course plenty of rookies that not only had a great rookie season in their own rights, but completely reset new expectations for years to come for future NFL rookies. Within the year, though, there were several players that had big expectations heading into 2021 that ultimately failed to reach those set expectations, and that's what we are going to be discussing in today's video. A couple of NFL players who will now very much be entering make or break years in 2022 because they never broke out and hit those set expectations in 2021. There may be a surprise or two in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are going to start today's video with Steelers receiver Chase Claypool. Toss aside the Claypool flexing at the end of the Vikings game after a first down and the TikTok drama and his personality on Twitter and the off-field shenanigans, if you will, and Claypool had a very productive rookie season, all things considered. He had a very impressive 11 touchdowns in 2020, and while he wasn't the best receiver in the 2020 class, and that was a very loaded draft class, he was certainly up there. And in 2021, he was expected to take a big step, and it was teammate Deontay Johnson who did instead, and rookie tight end Pat Freiermuth as well. Claypool headed into this year expecting a Pro Bowl, I'm sure, after an 850-yard, 11 total touchdown rookie season, including a career-high 4 total touchdowns against the Eagles in October of 2020, which, by the way, that game was absolutely nothing short of impressive, but what Claypool got in 2021 was much less. Chase had 45 yards or less in 9 different games, and in those said games, he had 5 or more targets in each and every one of those. He also only had 2 touchdowns this past year after the big number of 11 in his rookie season, and a lot of those touchdowns this year went to the rookie Freiermuth, who had 7 in his own rights. Claypool was at times a disappointment on the field as well as a distraction off, and for someone who is now entering year 3 of a 4-year contract, with at this point what will be uncertainty at the quarterback position, that's pretty much the last thing you'd want from a player in Chase Claypool. The best example to describe his disastrous 2021 season was the whole music situation for the Steelers. Claypool said something like, maybe if we played music at practice, we would perform better and practice would be fun, and Mike Tomlin, the Super Bowl champion head coach, pretty much shut that idea down immediately. Chase was still a relatively productive player, as 59 catches for 860 yards isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but for how he was supposed to step up and given the distraction he was at times this past year, he was not worth the hassle to Yinzer Nation in 2021. Next is a player who, while he did get injured midway through the year, he in his own rights was not having a good 2021, and it's football team / Commanders defensive lineman Chase Young. Young was one of the most highly touted prospects over the past decade, and out of the pass rushers of him, Clowney, Garrett, and Chase, there were a lot of people that had him right up there with Jadeveon, and his rookie season proved a lot of those people right. Chase had 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and was the Defensive Rookie of the Year by a considerable margin. It really wasn't a crazy thought to think he would come into 2022 and not necessarily lead the league in sacks, but most definitely have a very good second season, make a second consecutive Pro Bowl, and single-handedly take over a game or two. That didn't happen in 2021 before he was injured, and Chase had a noticeable sophomore slump. And while sacks are not the end-all be-all statistic when coming to pass rushers, because they're not, Chase only had 4 quarterback hits in the 9 games he played, and you didn't hear a lot about him or from him, and understandably so. Now, Chase Young is in a very pivotal year of his career next year, because the teams make a decision after the 3rd year of players' careers whether or not to pick up the 5th year option. Obviously, that only applies to first-round picks, and Chase was a first-round pick. Now, unless Chase is flat out awful or terrible, as Charles Barkley would say, as the former number 2 overall pick in the draft, the Commanders will more than likely pick the option up. And again, it is very unfortunate Chase got hurt, and we all wish him the best in his injury recovery. Chase was not the same player in 2021 that we saw in 2020. Now, I like Young a lot and think he is a very, very good football player. I just hope we see a fully recovered and rejuvenated Chase Young in 2022. Now, this next player is a player who didn't have these otherworldly expectations like Young or Claypool had, but Sam Darnold did have expectations in 2022 that he most certainly did not hit. Sam was expected to at least be better than he was for the Jets this past season, and he really was not that. And I wasn't expecting Darnold to go in to turn the Panthers around and compete in Week 18 for the NFC South against Tom Brady and his Bucs, but I was expecting much more than what we got, which was a 9-13 TD to INT ratio, and the second time in his 4-year career, the ratio has been negative. I was expecting a stat line of around maybe 33 to 3,500 yards, 20 to 22 touchdowns, and maybe 10 to 12 interceptions. That, in my eyes, would have been a successful season for not only Darnold, but for the Panthers franchise for thinking they would have maybe another year or two with him, and what was a trade of a 2nd round, 4th round, and 6th round picks was worth it. Instead, they found out quickly that Darnold is not their guy, and they are now most certainly in the quarterback conversation this offseason, whether that is trading for a veteran like Aaron Rodgers or a draft pick with their number 6 overall pick in a few short months. There's really no to be fair argument for Sam because he was bad, but what I will say in at least his favor is the coaching staff didn't exactly help him out or do any favors for either destination in his career, which is New York and Charlotte, but more specifically for today's video, Charlotte. Now, I don't think Sam would have been a Josh Allen and we would have had Bills Jets for the next decade by any means, but at this point I will always wonder what Sam could have been under the right circumstances. Now we have Baker Mayfield of the Cleveland Browns, and this one is a bit of a doozy. Baker and Cleveland entered 2021 with incredibly high expectations, and really understandably so. They not only had a great 2020 regular season in which rookie head coach Kevin Stefanski guided them to an 11-win year, and not only did they have a good regular season in 2020 in which they beat teams like the Titans, who were coming off of an AFC Championship game appearance in 2019, the Cowboys in Dallas, and that was before Dak got hurt, and the Colts, who were a playoff team in their own rights. They beat Big Brother in a playoff game in their stadium with everything on the line in the wild card round in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And while they weren't expected to win in Kansas City in the divisional round, and they didn't, they took them down to the wire, and Baker had a great second half of the season and notched his first career playoff win. 2020 by every metric was an extremely successful year for Cleveland, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately depending on how you look at it, with the success they had comes increased expectations, and whether it was because of Baker having countless injuries or just flat out playing bad, because you could definitely attribute some of those injuries to those poor performances, he did not perform to the level he was expected to this past year. There were times in 2021 where it was truly awful for the Browns, and a 45-7 loss in New England and a 16-10 loss in Baltimore, in which the Browns created 4 turnovers, exemplifies that. They missed the playoffs, and they went from not having a Mahomes-type unicorn quarterback, but what they thought was their guy for the next decade, and under the right circumstances, Baker and the Browns could win, and they proved that. But whether it was the aforementioned Patriots or Ravens loss, or even a 15-10 loss to the Steelers at home, or the blowout loss to the Cardinals, also at home, it was underwhelming game after underwhelming game, and even when they won, a perfect example of this is a 13-10 win against the Lions, in which they barely escaped that game with a win when they were winless. It was just an underwhelming year for the Browns. And again, some of that can probably be attributed to the injuries he had, but playing devil's advocate here, you'd have to think Case Keenum doesn't turn the ball over, in LeBron James' words, not 2, not 3, but 4 times in Green Bay, in what was a 24-22 final score, with, by the way, the last gasp of Cleveland's playoffs hopes on the line. It was truly a disappointing year for Baker and the Browns, and that kind of pie chart or that flow chart of, Baker gets disrespected, he becomes an underdog again, then he starts to play well, and then he starts to play bad, that recurring thing for the Browns. Maybe we get that in 2022, and Baker plays well in a contract year. Baker would obviously have every incentive to play well and to work his absolute tail off this offseason to get a $100+ million contract. And if he plays well in 2022 and the Browns win another playoff game, there's no doubt in my mind, right, wrong, or indifferent, that he will receive a very large contract. And here's to hoping he does. Now, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I cannot thank you guys enough for the continued support. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Comment who you think's winning the Super Bowl. Have a great day. Love you guys.